Welcome back to Season 5 of the Changing Earth podcast with Sara F. Hathaway, blending survival fiction and fact to bring you entertaining education that will help you dream, survive, and thrive. And now, here's your host, Sara F. Hathaway.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Changing Earth podcast. Happy to have you back with me today. This is episode number 171, Season 5, Episode 8. So right now, I don't know how it is on the East Coast. It may have already come down, but it is acorn season out here in California. And it's a great time to go out there, collect acorns, and harvest them. So this is a great food source. It has protein, it has fat, and they're really, really utilizable. So you should learn how to start taking advantage of the acorn feast that happens this time of year because it is an awesome survival skill. The oak is a plant that exists across the entire country. So once you learn to properly process acorns, you can basically do it anywhere you are in the world. Well, anywhere you are in the United States. So go out there. I've got lots of articles. I've been in the process of switching my blog on Google on their format over to my blog on Wix. My survival guide is finally updated, all complete. So every episode that I've ever done on the Changing Earth podcast is now in one area, one page. You can just go and click on the survival guide and it's got all the information you can possibly want. So they are all over there in one spot. But you're going to find the acorn information in my in my blog, and I'll go ahead and try and root that out so I can share with you how to process acorns. Pretty easy process of leaching them so that they're edible and you can use the flour. You just got to get the tannin out of it. Pretty easy to do, and it's definitely worth your while because it is an abundant food source this time of year. So you should be harvesting as much as you can and then storing them up for the entire season. Okay, so enough about acorns. I want to go ahead and thank my Patreon members. You guys, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your contributions to the show. If you have the, ways and means to be able to donate, it's as little as $3 a month to the show. I'd really appreciate it. I'm trying to work on getting the Changing Earth series to turn into a TV series. And it all costs money. I have all the pieces in place to pitch it, to help get it where it needs to go, but it all costs money every time I do it. So that's why I've been really adamant about trying to get some more of you guys to go out there and support the show, because that's where I'm trying to get the books to go. And I know I can do it. It's just a matter of getting the capital. So if it takes me a year, or if it takes me 7, we'll just work with that schedule. But the more capital I have to be able to pay for all the entrance and things, where it takes to, what it takes to get it to move down that road, then the quicker I can do that. So if you can go over to Patreon, help me out. It's www.patreon.com/Changing Earth. Support the show, keep the show running, and help get these book series out to a bigger platform. And, there's really good things for them in the future. So I want to see them go there, and I bet you do too. It's always been a fun story, and wouldn't it be great to see it as a TV series? So last week in Dark Days of Denver, Erica was having this argument with her mom about what her hobbies are, what she likes to do. Her mom wasn't very happy with some of the choices she's making because she's just training and, cleaning weapons and sharpening knives and stuff. And her mom doesn't think that's, the best life choice, but Erica's life is what it is. So they're trying to encourage Erica to go out and have some fun. But today we're going to take a look at Daniel's character. And Daniel's character is a really cool character because he's really developed with the book series. So in this episode, he meets a great guy who's trying to, address some of Daniel's internal issues that he has going on. And today I have Sam Bradley back on the show. I am so honored every time I get to have Sam on the show because Sam has really been in the heart of a lot of these disasters that took place within the United States with her medical teams. and just some incredible stories that come out of these really, really hard situations. And what we're talking about today is PTSD, or PTSI, as she calls it, and what, the name that they're trying to alter the name so it's not a disorder anymore. So PTSI in children, and how that affects them. How can it be long-term effects? And, in a survival situation, a natural disaster, things like that, these things could come up, and we have to know how to identify them and how to deal with them, both if we had access to professional help and if we didn't. So that's what we're talking about today. Can't wait to get into that. But first, let's go ahead and listen to Chapter 8 of Dark Days in Denver. Chapter 8. The sun began to set low as Erica tore through her bag. "I don't own any clothes except the camos and those ripped up jeans," she grumbled at Vince. "Just wear your jeans and a t-shirt. You look hot in anything," Vince told her, irritated with her delay. Erica slid the jeans on. They were tight and hugged her backside firmly. Vince approached her and cupped one of her butt cheeks. "Oh no, mister. Everyone is waiting for us," she told him, removing his hand. "See? Hot," he insisted. "You ready?" "Yeah, I'm ready," she replied, sliding her t-shirt over her scarred skin. Sergeant Hensley met them outside as they walked out of the tent and into a large crowd of people heading for the town. "Come on, cheer up, baby. What's the worst that could happen? Heaven forbid we might have some fun," Vince jested with her. "Out having fun when we don't even know where our friends are," Erica grumbled. "There's nothing we can do for them now. We must trust that Cole will get them home safely. Worrying about it is useless," he told her. "I know," Erica mumbled. "There you are," Nancy declared, finding Erica in the crowd. "This is Walter." "Hello, Miss Case. Nice to meet you," he declared, shaking Erica's hand. He was a shorter man with graying hair. His round face produced a heartfelt smile. "Hi, nice to meet you," Erica responded, unsure if he was sincere or just being nice to the daughter of the woman that he wanted to take to his bed later tonight. "I understand you're from California," he said. "You must have an interesting story." Erica shot her mom a look. "That was a long time ago. We've been with the mercenary forces in the western region pretty much since the quake." "Yeah, your mom said you are one hell of a fighter." "Not really my thing anymore. If everyone would just put the guns down, maybe we could focus on rebuilding our country rather than destroying it," he attested. "Yeah, maybe," Erica responded unenthusiastically. Vince had been listening in and wondered how long it would take Erica to voice her real opinion. He knew she was feeling this man out, analyzing his character. Before the opportunity to counter his argument presented itself, Vince declared, "Hi, I'm Eddie." "You must be the son-in-law," Walter said. "Yes, sir, I am," he replied. "Good for you being able to keep your family together. Quite a rarity these days. Looks like you've been in one heck of a battle recently, though," Walter said condescendingly. He had noticed Vince's fading black eye and missing tooth. "Let's just say it was an interesting trip back to base this last go-round," Vince explained without elaborating. He quickly changed the subject. "What sort of work are you doing?" "I work for Lars over at the Homestead Farms," he explained. "Lucky for me, I was doing laundry today and ran into Nancy here." "That's something," Vince replied, unsure if this guy was good enough for his mother-in-law. Vince and Walter continued talking about the gardening operations as Erica's mind drifted. "Hi, Mom," Star announced, fighting through the crowd with Kyle. "Hey, guys," Erica replied, noticing Kyle's hand holding tight to Star's hip as they approached. "I'm so glad you decided to come, Karen. We're going to have some fun tonight," Kyle announced, playing a fake guitar in the air. Nancy introduced Walter to Star and Kyle. Erica wondered where Dexter was, but she knew her boy. He would pop up eventually. Daniel sat alone, watching the water run under the bridge. He was thinking of the first time he saw a swimming pool. It was years ago in Las Vegas after his parents took the job with the rescue squad. He smiled at the memory of Greg teaching him how to dive that followed. The small piece of charcoal that he held in his hand vigorously ran across the paper he held. Suddenly he jerked his head up. He knew someone was watching him. "Hello again," an older man declared. "Didn't you want to go to town with the others?" The old man peeked over Daniel's shoulder, admiring his work. "You really are a fantastic artist, young man. What's your name?" the man wondered. Daniel stammered, trying to remember his fake last name. "Case, Danny Case." You draw like Michelangelo, but you can't remember your own last name, the man queried. Well, what's yours? Daniel asked defensively. My name is Aesop Rowan, but you can call me Mr. Rowan, he told Daniel. Okay, Daniel replied, thinking it was a strange way to introduce yourself. Would you like to come see my studio, Danny? Mr. Rowan asked. You have a studio? Daniel wondered. Come and see, the man replied. Daniel slowly meandered with Mr. Rowan as he picked his way along, leaning on his cane. In his excitement, Daniel wished the old man would shuffle along a little faster. He followed Mr. Rowan to the homesteader's gate and entered a small house at the very end of the community. Daniel gasped as he stepped in. The walls were decorated with wonderful paintings done in dramatic colors. These are beautiful. Look at the colors, Daniel declared with awe. Oil painting, the man explained. Have you ever tried? Oh, no. When I was young, people would give me watercolors now and then. I've made my own paints, and I have a good supply of sketching charcoal. But I've never seen paintings like this, Daniel explained, studying the canvases adorning the room. I have an extra easel. Why don't you try to paint that river you were staring at? Mr. Rowan insisted. Really? On a canvas? Daniel asked, shocked by the man's generosity. Here's the paints and a palette, Mr. Rowan told him, showing him the supplies. Daniel took the palette and carefully squeezed some blue as well as white and black onto it. He sat down and began working. The old man sat back and watched Daniel's brush strokes as he delicately dipped the brush into the paint. He expertly slid the paint across the canvas, recalling every detail of the riverbed. Hours passed, and the old man sat in a meditative state, waiting. I'm done, Daniel declared cheerfully. The old man rose from his resting spot and examined his artwork. You added lilies on the riverbank, he commented. It needed more color, Daniel replied. Is that okay? Your work is a projection of yourself, the man explained. Did I do it right? Daniel wondered. There is no right and wrong, Danny, the man replied. Suddenly, Daniel noticed that the sun had set outside. Oh my goodness, the boy declared. My grandparents will be worried sick. Then go, boy, Mr. Rowan told him, handing him a rag for his hands. Thank you so much, sir. That was a spectacular experience, Daniel told him as he wiped his hands. I'll see you again soon, Mr. Rowan told him as Daniel ran out the door. He tore through the rows of tents but slowed as he reached the row where his tent was. He composed himself and caught his breath. There you are, Daniel, Kay said as he approached. Where have you been? We've been waiting for you to go to dinner. I'm sorry, I was out drawing and lost track of time, Daniel explained. But it's been dark for an hour, Kay countered. I must have dozed off, Daniel said defensively. It's too late for dinner now, Kay explained, making Daniel feel guilty. I'm sorry, Grandma, the boy replied. Lucky for you, your sister works in the kitchen and brought us dinner, Kay told him with a smile. Come on, let's eat. They entered the tent and ate around the small table in the center. Distracted by his art project, Daniel arrives home late. And Daniel's really dealing with a lot of these demons that he has in his closet from experiences he's gone through. And, his life has not been an easy one, having been born in the FEMA camp and everything like that. So today I wanted to take a look at the long-term effects of PTSD in children, what that looks like, and how we can handle that if we had access to a professional or if we did not have access to a professional. So today we have Sam Bradley back on the show. Sam is an MS EPT-P. She's been in EMS for 38 years as a paramedic, clinical and educational services coordinator, and ambulance company paramedic field supervisor. She also has spent many years as an EMS educator. Sam currently works as a QI consultant and EMS educator for fire departments and communication centers. A prolific writer, she does freelance work for EMS-related journals, online publications, and textbook publishers. Sam has published a number of fiction stories and is very involved in social media and blogging. Following her passion for disaster EMS, she is the training officer for the Federal Disaster Medical Assistant Team, DMAT, CA-6. She also dabbles in photography and videography. She is currently residing in Colorado and spends her time working on EMS CE content and writing EMS textbooks and novels. She co-hosts a popular weekly podcast that is in its 5th year. She loves dogs and banana cream pie. You can get a hold of Sam at www.disasterpodcast.com. That's www.disasterpodcast.com. So let's go ahead and welcome Sam to the show. Today, I am honored to have Miss Sam Bradley back on my show. Hello, Sam. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you for inviting me again. We have a lot of fun when we do this. Even though we might get into a serious topic, we can still enjoy the process.
Fair enough. And we do a good deal of talking outside of the process that I really enjoy. So
I enjoy that too.
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and just give a short introduction of yourself, what you're kind of working on, and where folks can find you?
Well, I've been spent my career as a paramedic doing any number of things from working in the streets to education. I'm kind of semi-retired. I moved from California to Colorado, and I'm out here in the country with dogs and chickens and such, and I'm much enjoying that. It gives me time to write, which is one of the things I really look forward to doing when I had time, although I don't seem to have as much time as I thought I would. I also have the Disaster Podcast. We're moving into our 6th year of that. It's complementary to this one, so we kind of listen to each other's stuff, called the Disaster Podcast. We also have a page on Facebook where you can find me if you search Disaster Podcast or disasterpodcast.com. I'm on most social media places under Sam Bradley or Sam Bradley 11.
Excellent. So today is kind of a dark topic, but I've got Daniel in my story, and he's this young man who's had a tough go of life, being the son of Erica and Vince. So I wanted to talk a little bit today about PTSD in children and how it affects them. So what is PTSD?
Well, I've got kind of a surprise that came to me from one of our PTSD or critical incident stress management experts that I interview occasionally. And he just went to a refresher and found there's a change in terminology, which I am going to use, called PTSI. It seemed a lot of people, and I would agree with this, didn't like the label of PTSD because who wants to have a stress disorder? No one likes to feel they have a disorder, although many of us have had injury from certain events that they've been involved with. So now it's called post-traumatic stress injury. So you are one of the first to actually hear that. I guess it's fairly new. So that is much more palatable. I try to avoid any diagnosis with disorder in it. It doesn't give me a level of comfort. So we're going to refer to it as PTSI from now on. Basically, it just we all have coping mechanisms, some stronger than others, but when those fail, then we go into sometimes negative coping behaviors, and sometimes we can pull out of those and sometimes we can't. If those continue, then you might end up with a longer term incident called PTSI. It can be a biological injury that develops after a person has experienced or witnessed a terrifying event. Now, for those of us that do EMS for a living or work on a disaster medical assistance team like I do, you can also have a cumulative effect if someone is involved in multiple things. And that would work well more for your kind of scenario when you're talking about a survival situation or where society is broken down, so they have just repeated different critical events that occur. So I would think it'd be very common in the world that you've developed. If they don't get better, then they may develop PTSI. That involves things that heavy duty, like flashbacks, nightmares, anxiety, frightening thoughts that get worse or could last for months or years or whatever it is. The kind of the thing that defines it is it interferes with their daily lives. So a lot of us kind of are closet PTSI, where we have things that we experience, but it doesn't really interfere with our ability to function. It wouldn't be noticeable to most people. But when it does, now we're talking about a more serious problem.
I like that. Well, I don't like that it's happening, but
You like the
but
definition. Okay.
yes, yeah, because you would just assume that if you're living in that kind of situation where you're exposed to those stresses on a daily basis, it's really unimaginable kind of from our nice cushy lives.
It is. And if you think about, the sympathetic response or the fight or flight, and I'm
Mhm.
sure you're familiar with it, and I'm
Oh
sure
yeah.
your listeners are, but that's when your body is ready for handling either running, fight, or flight. You're either going to take it on or you're going to run away from it. But your body responds in a way where your pupils dilate and your heart rate's faster and you're breathing faster and more blood goes to your musculature so you can run. And that's okay. It's meant for a short term, I got to fix this, or the dinosaur is going to eat me, or I'm going to run
Right.
away. Your body is not meant to be in that shape all the time, and it does a lot of physiological damage if it is. So in your kind of catastrophic situation, that's kind of what we would be looking at. We can't even look at, okay, well, this will be over, the earthquake's over, and now we can kind of go back to our normal life. Well, there is no such thing as a normal life in a catastrophic situation. So,
Right.
that is going to have a profound effect on humans in general.
How does this affect children differently than adults? So is there a difference there between a child and an adult?
Very much so. A lot of that has to do with their age, and I don't have time to really go into an age breakdown on how they fare with these things. But in general, especially smaller kids, don't have an ability to view the world or a specific incident from another person's perspective. They can't, a small child isn't, and I'll use ground zero as an example because that's something, of course, I'm near and dear to,
Hmm.
especially when it comes to children. But they can't understand when they see something on TV what it really means or how it may affect the people in their household. One thing that's really important about kids, and I want to drive this home, they tend to take on blame for things.
Okay.
So if something bad happens, even though I found that out time and time again as a medic, something happens to a parent, and or somebody dies or something critical happens, the child will often feel they did something to cause that to happen. Or a
Hmm.
sibling gets run. I just remember one incident where a sibling got run over by his father backing up the car. And I guess he'd had a fight with his sister. And this kid, I don't know, was about 7 or 8, and he blamed himself. That can really put somebody into a lifelong spiral.
Yeah.
So, we have to pay attention to the fact that they're likely to go there, and we have to assure them that they did not have anything to do with the fact that this happened. Younger kids, and well, even older ones, and that's kind of an interesting thing. During an event, they may refer to earlier behavior patterns. So kids who've never wet the bed may start wetting the bed.
Okay.
Sleep problems, separation anxiety, those kinds of things, which may go away and may not. So we'll talk later about how we can manage that. Older kids tend to be angry. They may be more aggressive. They may start having problems in school, or they may withdraw. And we'll talk more about those too. Basically, they feel a wide range of emotions, a range of emotions. Some of them want to retell the experience over and over, which may be a good thing to do,
Yep.
or they may refuse to discuss it at all, which is even a little more scary. They really depend on their caretakers for protection, and we need to make sure we give it to them. When there's a disruption, especially of family structure and support, and we'll talk about that. But another thing that's important is they may mimic the behavior of the parents or the response to the parents. And this is one thing, and I'll talk more about kids in Ground Zero. We found this to be true because there was so much anxiety over that. The TV was on constantly. The parents were, oh my God, the world's never going to be the same, and na 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 na, and this gloom and doom. And of course, the kids are responding. If their parents are scared, they're going to be scared, although they have no idea why.
Yeah.
So we have to be really careful when there's an event that's on the media constantly. We want to, not have that TV on all the time, not have them exposed to it all the time. and not have us react, at least in front of them, to how we feel about it. There may be an occasion for that, but especially the way everybody responded to ground zero, it's the end of the world, and the kids are
Right.
going, oh my God, what does that really mean? So it's just something to be really aware of, regardless of what event we're dealing with.
Yeah, I find that too. Just as somebody who studies survival, and I train in wilderness survival. I train this stuff all the time, and it's definitely my life. But with my children, I try to, it's going to be a fun situation. We're learning how to evacuate because we might have a wildfire, but it's not so scary as it seems. I try to take away my anxiety over what might be coming our way, and that's why we're getting ready for it. I try to take that away and just present it as, we're going to run this drill just because it's fun, and we're going to do it as a family because we're a team and stuff like that, instead of them being like, like
Right.
the end of the world's coming, and that's why we're all preparing for this, and that's why we have lots of food stores and stuff like that. It's like, no, look, the power just went out for a couple days, so we have extra food, and I'm going to make sure you're fed during the event.
Yeah, and you
I
can have
try.
fun with that, with your
Yeah.
lighting and whatever. So
Yeah, exactly. We're gonna light candles, and we get to play board games instead of video games, stuff like that. So they're
yeah,
not like freaking out over it, even though you might be freaking out inside. You don't want. I found
right.
that out during our first evacuation with my son. With my little son, he was only like 5, and he just freaked because we're all freaking. And my husband didn't really have a grip like I did on what we should be doing and stuff like that. And so after that, I was like, no, we're going to change this game up. Here's your own go bag, and it's fun. You get to put your own toys in there, whatever, and made it into like a cool event instead of like, our house is going to burn down and we got a 4-wheel drive across the property to get out of here, So yeah, I could see that
Exactly.
for
That
sure.
is the real message in all of this, I think, and we'll refer more to that as we go on.
Yeah. So, what are some of the signs that we should look for in our children if we're in these situations to really know, like, they might be really struggling with this, but they're trying to be strong and not tell us?
Yeah, well, there's that.
Right. Yeah.
You look for changes in behavior, which I'd be very surprised if there wasn't any. They may be temporary, but again, they may be not temporary, and that's what you need to watch down the line, because some people take a while to really start manifesting PTSI. So this isn't just okay, well, 2 weeks after the event, we're good. It may be, it may not be. They have physiological responses. And this is not necessarily PTSI. This is like a normal response. We always call this a normal response to an abnormal event. And again, as far as our regular coping mechanisms will go, this is just a normal process. Changes in eating and sleeping, increased sensitivity to sound, including a startle response, increased physical complaints. Kids will have tummy aches and headaches because they're stressed. Continual focus on this event. And of course, that was the case with ground zero because it was in their face all the time. Some kids will become belligerent. Maybe that isn't in their nature. They will act out, or like you refer to, they may act belligerent and tough, or they might just be unwilling to cooperate with what their norm is with home and school activities because they feel helpless or hurt inside. So their tough behavior is an attempt for them to feel stronger and safer, but it's really for themselves more so than it is everybody else. For everybody else, it's not working too well. So again, we'll talk about how to manage these things later. Some kids can become depressed, and that can be fairly soon, or it can be much later. And again, their eating and sleeping habits change. Their behavior may be less energetic or even despondent. And you'll see this in adults as well. This may happen months after an incident. So things are broiling in there that you're not seeing. It's very common, and I think I touched on this, to have kids regress. Smaller kids may need to be held constantly. They may be especially fearful. They don't want to be alone.
Mhm.
Teenagers are actually kind of amusing. I always think about, okay, there's 4 teenagers in a Jeep and they crash and they're tough and they've been drinking and all of this. And then when you go to take care of them, they start crying for their mommy.
Right.
Yeah, well, yeah, that
Yeah.
happens. Even teenagers may be afraid to sleep alone. They may need the light on. And, they may hide that because it's juvenile.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So again, this may have a long-term effect depending on their coping mechanisms. It may feel safe for them to feel, it may take a while for them to feel safe in their world again. So it depends how much it actually affects their home, or it's an event like, a disaster that we're facing right now in Florida, or ground zero, or something that's farther away that they're not being affected by personally, other than what their parents project. And again, we want to be careful of that. Some kids may have a protective behavior. I can see your son doing this, so it's not a bad thing. They want to protect themselves and you. So even a 10-year-old, like your Daniel in your story, might act strong and grown up. They want to appear unaffected by what's going on. This is how they control their feelings of helplessness and fear. In a way, it's kind of a denial of their own feelings, but it's not necessarily a bad thing if they can make them feel good. And I'll talk later about something you referred to. Making kids a part of the process is critically important. If they have something to do, they're going to feel much better about themselves. They're not going to fall into dysfunctional behavior because they don't know what to do.
Right.
So we'll talk more about that too. So those are just kind of some things you might see.
Yeah, because it's just good to have the signs to look for. So as you're trying to handle everything that you're going through, especially like you say in a short-term event, after the event's done, you got to keep your eye on your children and make sure
Right.
that everything is going along okay. If you notice those behavioral changes, that's when it's time to queue up and focus in on what's going on internally.
Well, and little kids might be more resilient to this. And if we have time, I'll talk about some of the letters that we got at Ground Zero that kind of reflect on this. It's the kid that tends to hold things inside that you need to be concerned with. And when you're a parent busy with managing everything else you need to manage in a disaster, you're not going to pay as much attention, unfortunately.
Mhm.
You can only divide your mind and body in so many directions. So it's easy to miss these things, like I said before. So, maybe when things settle in, and I guess that's what we're going to talk about here pretty quickly.
Yeah, so let's just jump right into that. If we don't have professional help available, how do we help our children deal with the stresses that are going on?
Well, the goal would be to not have them get to a point where they need professional help.
Right.
If they truly get into a PTSI scenario, then of course that's a good thing to do. But, set up a time to talk to the child alone. And you're going to do it, quietly and gently. Use developmentally appropriate communication. You're not going to talk to a 12-year-old the same way you're going to talk to a 3-year-old,
Right.
because you kind of understand what they understand and what they don't. Use a soft, calming voice, use good eye contact. Gentle touch is always helpful, especially with smaller kids who really need that, because it shows, hey, my people are here, they're not going anywhere. Let them know, and especially based on a child who tends to hold things in, let them know that you understand how difficult it is to share your feelings. Treat their fears as genuine. You never just say, oh yeah, you'll get over it.
Right.
Bad
Yeah,
thing to
not
do,
when
because
it
then they
comes to that.
start
Yep.
withdrawing even more. Exactly. Be
Mhm.
clear, be honest, talk to them to an extent that you feel appropriate about your feelings or how you may feel in their situation. That you're not immune to being scared or being concerned about the future or any of that. Their feelings of anger, sadness, guilt, embarrassment, relief, love, all of that are normal, even though they're not the normal feelings they'd have every day. And whatever you talk about in terms of how we're going to deal with this, don't make promises you can't keep. Don't tell them, this is, ground zero is going to go away tomorrow and we'll never hear it about it again.
Right. Yeah.
Wrong. Uh, you know,
Yep.
and you can, if your kids like to, I don't know how I want to put this. They're extroverts. Okay, engage in physical expression with them. Draw together, and some of the drawings we saw from Ground Zero. I mean, those things are healing. you and I write. That's kind of how we diffuse ourselves, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. Everybody has a different way of doing it. Kids really express themselves through, drawing. Play with stuffed animals. Use puppets maybe as a means to draw the child out, draw out their emotions. Now, specifics like belligerent kids, especially the teens, don't even really know they're angry. They don't really know that they're acting out this way. So talk to them about your experiences with loss and anger. Let them know, there's a human side to you. You may have experienced what they're experiencing now. Help them understand they have a right to their feelings, but let them understand that belligerent behavior or dysfunctional behavior is affecting you as the parent or your siblings. And it's not, if you kind of put them in an older kid into a position that your smaller siblings depend on you, and they're going to feel the way you feel if you're scared or you're being belligerent or you're not being helpful, they're going to mimic that. So, you have you need to bring them along behind you and consider their feelings and how they're going to react to you. If they're alienating others, that's not a good thing either, because they could be supporting you. But if you're being belligerent, then there's a natural tendency to have a negative reaction to that. If they start looking depressed, talk about that. It's a natural part of trauma. Yeah. But if the strong feelings aren't resolved, it can move to that extreme state that lowers the child's ability to function. That's when we're moving into PTSI. If they've lost something they love, or you can imagine all those kids that lost relatives at ground zero, that probably needs to be dealt with professionally at some point in time. But, we're kind of dealing with the immediate aftermath. If the child regresses, try to draw out their fears, allow them to express themselves, let them ask all the questions they want to ask. If they feel like you don't want to be bothered with this, they're going to regress even more. This is an important point too in general, try as you can. Now, if this is a catastrophic situation, it's not going to happen, but be as consistent as you can with their schedule. They're used to that, regularity. So as much as you can get them back into a regular schedule, that's really helpful. Did I tell you about the earthquake in Whittier in 1986 and all the kids that were in the shelter? I don't remember if we discussed that. Yeah.
Yeah, when we did the refugee episode.
Podcast. Yep. And, none of these kids, because they ran for their lives and ended up in a high school auditorium, as a shelter, and I was a shelter manager, and just, they had nothing. And you don't really remember how important toys or their blanket, or they all have a special thing that gives them a feeling of security. Well, the firemen I was working for in another city at the time, it was an all industrial city that made things. And this particular company made stuffed animals. And when I came to work one day, they had this 6-foot bag of stuffed animals that this company provided. And I thought, this is awesome. And one of the coolest things I was ever able to do was take in this bag of stuffed animals to the shelter. And these kids were just like, boom, magnets.
Right? Yeah,
and
that's awesome.
The light in their eyes. And I told them, okay, if you want one of these, then you need to write a thank you note to the firefighters and the company that provided them. And it made, everybody told me after that, it made such a difference in their ability to have comfort, to calm down, to have something to do. I mean, their whole demeanor changed after just having a toy that they could now, make their own. That was just huge. And I'll never forget.
Having the responsibility of like, we got to say thank you. And these people were so cool. They're giving to us. We're giving back to them kind of thing. I mean, that's really got to make a big difference too.
Exactly. And I hadn't even thought about it. I'm sure glad the firefighters did, because that made such a huge difference. And of course, that gives the parents a little bit of ease as well, because they can't just run out to Walmart and buy them a stuffed toy,
Right.
So it contributes to the effort of recovery because it decreases helplessness for the parents, and it gives the child something of great value. Another thing, we talk about diffusing kids. Again, with Ground Zero, a lot of schools had kids write letters to the people at Ground Zero, and that was all of us, of course. But one of the people that I worked with in another DMAT, he was really into psychology, and I was kind of afraid to take them. Because it just, well, that's selfish. I don't want to take, because what they would do is where we had our relaxation, if you will, there was a Marriott that was close by. It was still intact, but it wasn't functioning as a, open hotel. But
yeah.
that's where we would go to eat and to relax. And there was a massage therapist, and there were computers if you wanted to write home and all of that. But everywhere we went, and there was also a church that had these letters just spread out everywhere. So when we were having our downtime, we could read these letters. Well, he became so intrigued with these, he took a bunch of them and kind of divided them up into the kinds of reactions that children were having. And it really showed their unrecognized strengths. And he actually kind of cataloged them. I saved one, and it said something like, "Gee, I hope you're still alive, because if you're not, then you wouldn't be enjoying yourself," or something like that. Huh?
Right.
But okay. But it just kind of struck
Interesting.
me. Yeah. And there were a lot of really interesting things that you wouldn't expect kids to say. And one of the most amusing, or not amusing, but touching for me, was they were smarter than we are. They were telling us, you need to take a break. You need to phone home. You need to, take care of yourself. You need to eat. You need to drink. And it's like we weren't doing that.
Right.
But these kids were saying, you really do need to take care of us. They understood that we were in a difficult situation psychologically and physiologically. And, it's like, wow, yeah.
Yeah, it's like
But
we love you and appreciate all your work, so make sure you're taking care of yourself while you're at
exactly.
it there.
So
Yeah,
you
that's
can go
cool.
back to your families and be
Yeah.
healthy. They also had letters from kids that were directly affected. I've lost my uncle, I've lost my parents. You could kind of tell the magnitude of that hadn't yet hit them. But the way they wrote some of these letters, where they were striving to understand why this happened. But they were mellow about it. They were, and telling us, you be careful out there, because I know what happened to Uncle Ed.
Oh, yeah.
Others, again, were touching and insightful, like giving us the advice on how to take care of ourselves. Some were downright humorous. And of course, the general rise of patriotism and pride were seen in these kids. Their heroes were no longer, secret rangers. They were firefighters.
Yeah.
Some of them were actually angry. They wanted to go kill bin Laden. They wanted to go kill all the bad people that did stuff.
That caused this. Yeah.
Exactly. There was a general concern and acceptance. They were becoming more accepting of this event than we were. They were striving for a return to normalcy that we couldn't yet do. But I mean, they were just mind-blowing. I've got a whole bunch of them that Jim put together in this presentation. If you're interested, I'll send it to you.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Just amazing. And like one of them wrote about, everybody was writing to the firefighters and the workers there, but one of them said, "I really like the dump truck drivers." He had a special affinity for the
Yep.
guys that were picking up trash. And I thought,
That would be my
nobody's,
son.
yeah, nobody's being left out here. It's
Right.
really cool. You'll have to, you would get
Yeah.
a big charge out of this, and you're welcome to share it. I've
Okay,
actually,
that'd be great.
I
Yeah.
presented this a number of times at different places I was asked to speak, but it's just mind-boggling. And they did a lot for all of these kids that I didn't know, even though this exercise was meant to help them recover. Really kind of gave us a head slap and say, yeah, we kind of need to take care of ourselves out here.
Right? Yeah, that's always the key. Like you always learn more when you're teaching, right? So here you are trying to help these kids and
Exactly.
you're going, yeah, well, I guess we should turn that around and help ourselves while we're at it, right?
Yeah, and they were the ones to remind us. It seems like the adults were running around like the virtual chicken with their head cut off, and the kids
Right?
trying to pull it together. Yeah. Pretty
Yeah, and
amazing.
that's one of the things as I'm developing Daniel as a character that, I'm trying to look at because he has had this life of, struggle, struggle, struggle. So it's like, how would this affect him on a long-term basis?
It really depends on the person. It depends on, your kids would react very differently than some other kids in California
Hmm.
because you have prepped them. They would naturally respond to, okay, I want to be part of this recovery or part of protecting our environment or whatever it is may be. But you deal with kids that have never been in a disaster. Um, what are their regular coping mechanisms? What would they tend to do? Are they going to withdraw? Are they going to just cry all the time and want somebody to cater to them?
Yeah.
Adolescents are particularly interesting because they tend to, like we said, they may become aggressive or that kind of thing. They may have decreased impulse control. They do have increased risk of depression and increased risk for suicide, increased risk for both of those. So that's something you have to watch in them down the road. So
Yeah.
again, engaging them in the process is probably helpful. And with all kids, you want to let them know there's a plan, there's a system within your family and your community to keep them safe and to keep the entire family safe. And that's like your main goal is safety. Um, there's a protective behavior. Validate your loving protection, but explain to them it's okay to feel the way you're feeling. But you, as a parent or a caregiver, need to be a good role model.
Hmm.
There's a point in time where, you don't want to be crying and, Chicken Little and the sky's falling all the time because they're going to,
Right.
keep them in perpetual fear. But don't be afraid to share your tears, your anger, and your helplessness sometimes. Let them know that you also feel. You're not the Rock of Gibraltar, you're
Right.
not the brick wall. But then, you can recover and they can recover. And this is something you touched on. Give them a role. Everybody out there, and I really think your audience is the exception rather than the rule, should, of course, plan ahead. You were talking about having drills and making it fun and getting them in the habit. Each kid, even a little one, should have a role. Okay, if we have any kind of disaster, this is what we do and we need to evacuate. Your job is to get the dog.
Right.
Maybe it's a small thing because I've noticed with people in general, because I've seen a lot of people in crisis in the course of my work, but if they don't know what to do, say somebody, goes into cardiac arrest, they don't know what to do, then they run around in a circle and scream and, I
Yep.
want to do something, but I don't know what it is. Once they learn CPR, it's a natural tendency.
And it's
And
scary too, because like nowadays it seems like parents want to like sideline their kids, right? Like I'll take care of
right.
it, you don't worry about it. I'll take care of it, you don't worry about it. But providing them with that education is just absolutely essential. I mean, you're training them to be adults, not to be little children all their life.
Exactly. And what does that make them feel? Useless and helpless.
Yep. Yep.
And so they're going to stay in that useless and helpless, hey, cater to me. I know you have nothing else to do. No, give them a role, you know. And it does help the effort if all of the kids, first of all, it gets them out of your hair with mommy, mommy, what do I do? I'm scared,
Yep.
to
Yep.
having them actually help the effort of getting you out of there, whatever it is you need to do.
Yeah, getting
Um,
it done. And I know in the future when he's on his own with his family and stuff, even, if he doesn't practice it right away or whatever, he remembers, he'll know what to do because this is what we always did as a family.
and he will teach his kids to do
Exactly.
the same thing. I
Yep.
mean, we can get into the worst case scenario where society breaks down and whether to teach your kids to use weapons. I mean, that's going to be a personal decision, but
Yep.
it's something you'd have to think of on that level.
Yeah.
So the big thing is give them a role, exercise that role, have everybody has their go. The biggest thing is being prepared. All of that increases resilience in the face of disaster, and you have proven that by what you've done with your own family. So the best way to establish a sense of control and build confidence in children before a disaster is to engage them and involve them.
Yeah.
And after a disaster as well, children can contribute to a family recovery plan. And that's not something people think about too much because, the recovery would be different depending on the event you're dealing with. But again, you are in California currently, so you deal with wildfires. So deal with the kinds of events that your family most likely will suffer. I'm out here kind of on the periphery of Tornado Alley. So
Yeah.
that's, thank God the earth isn't shaking out here. I very much
Not
enjoy
yet.
that. But, I got to keep an eye on the clouds out there in case one decides to come our way. So you can kind of go on that, you are actually looking at the worst case scenario. So anything less than that, they'll be well prepared for.
Absolutely.
Like a wildfire. But, maybe if
And
you
I
move
think
to an
that
area, there's tornadoes.
I think that the pre-education too really hedges against the development of PTSD later because it wouldn't
Absolutely.
be such a shock, or PTSI I'm going to go with.
Right.
But yeah, but it wouldn't be such a shock to their system that they were prepared for, wow, there might come a day when a wildfire comes through and takes out our house, and we'll just have to deal with that. Instead of, oh my gosh, I never even knew this could happen. This is boom out of the blue. And now how am I going to cope with this?
Yeah, and I feel for those kids that are coddled and they're just going to shrink into a corner and need attention. And those are the ones that are going to end up with PTSI because
Yeah.
they were not prepared for anything to affect them directly.
So really
Um,
prepping your children.
and it's a good exercise, just a thought that occurred to me, is when you look at things going on real time but are farther away, like Florida, talk to your kids about, gee, what would we do? Not that we would have a hurricane, and well, even though it's possible in California, or a tidal wave, what would we do? Keep them thinking about how would we handle something like that, a water emergency or a cold emergency or a heat emergency. It's good to, have family conversations and get their gears moving, well, hey, because then they start thinking in like preventative ways. Oh, wow. Well, in that case, we need a
I would
boat.
do this. Yeah. Yeah,
Let's
absolutely.
have an inflatable boat. Good
Yeah.
idea. We're better than sitting on a roof waiting for somebody to come by and get you.
Yep.
you know?
And that's
So,
all like the pre-plan right there. Yep.
exactly.
Yep.
But think about things other than the ones that are most likely to affect you. Because you never know with the weather being weird the way it is these
Oh,
days.
tell me. That's why I said you guys haven't experienced an earthquake yet, but like the New Madrid fault line
Oh,
is
yeah.
starting to activate again, and there's been all kinds of activity around Yellowstone and stuff. So it's like
Yeah. My friends
heads
in the
up.
Midwest had a rather rude awakening the first time they had a 5.0 earthquake.
Yep.
These are disaster people, so they kind of knew it was, possible.
Possible. Yeah.
But,
But when it really
their
happens, you're like, what?
infrastructure is
Hmm.
not ready for that kind of thing, like it is in
Absolutely.
California, where the building codes are altogether different.
Well, you would like to think so, but they opened up San Francisco's building codes for a number of years, all the way up to like 2002 or something like that is when they finally clamped it back down. So like because they wanted to rebuild the city, basically, and
Yeah,
so you'd like to think so, but a lot of that city is built on fill, where they just took the remains of the
exactly.
1903 earthquake and pushed it out and built on top of it, and it's a huge. I
Yeah.
freak out every time I go to that city, like if I have to, because I hate to go there anyway. But I get new gray hairs every time. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what it's gonna happen. I'm gonna be here in this godforsaken place.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's what happens
Yeah.
to me every time I go over a bridge. Not now, please,
Right?
not
Yeah.
now. I
Yeah.
never much like bridges anyway, but when you get on a tall one, and even though they're built to sway, I don't particularly want to. Yeah, I think about the Loma Prieta quake, which a lot of my EMS cohorts were there when that happened, and that whole section, came down. And there's
Yeah.
that picture everybody knows of that one car just kind of teetering on the
Teetering.
edge of the
Yeah.
break. Like, I don't want to think about that. You can't prepare for that.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
But on that note is a final note here. Have stuff in your car. What if you do get stuck on a bridge? Something like that. Make sure you have a car kit. general stuff of lighting, of the food, of water. And depending on how many people are usually in your car, maybe there's an earthquake and you're fine, but you're stuck somewhere. And same thing like you saw in one of the big issues with Florida, were trees coming down, because the ground was so saturated from the previous hurricanes that these huge 100-year-old trees were coming down and blocking the roads. And you can't just, unless you run around with your chainsaw, it's going to take a while to get those out of there. So you may be stuck where you are. And
I always carry like a flat of water in my car and stuff like that.
Yeah. And, escape tools and all of those things I'm sure you've discussed. So, Final thought.
All right, Sam, why don't you go ahead one more time with the website and then we'll wrap it up.
You can find me at thedisasterpodcast.com and our Disaster Podcast site on Facebook, or any of the social medias under Sam Bradley or Sam Bradley 11.
Yeah, and if you're interested in disaster medicine, it's a really, really super cool podcast. So I always get over there and try to listen whenever I can. And I tell you, you learn a bunch every time you listen to it. So definitely a good one to check out.
Well, we've had some really interesting guests over there. And actually, we have about 650 members in our our Facebook group that are, these are amazing people. And every once in a while, someone will come out and say, hey, I could talk about this. It's like, oh my God, that's so awesome, because they're such a talented group of people that have done so many things. So, and you'll find them all on the Facebook group and other guests that we've had. So, in fact, our Dr. Joe just, here's actually the real parting note, talking about the heroes that are out there. Actually, I think we'll talk about that later. That's a whole different topic. But, I think of Dr. Joe, his wife is awesome. She gets on Facebook and talks about her hero out there doing these things for people. And he goes back to back with his FEMA resources. And, I got to give her credit, because it's so nice to see that. And it does a world of good for him, to know that she's out there so proud of him. So, take care of his back. Yeah.
Yep. Alrighty, Sam. Well, let's wrap it up there, because we're going to go over if we don't. And I'm sure we could just talk forever. So
good. Definitely.
Alrighty. Well, thank you so much.
You bet.
Thanks, Sam, so much for coming on the show and sharing your experiences with us and, your education on this topic. I really appreciate your time, because it's going to be really, really important to be able to identify PTSD in children, PTSI in children, and what that looks like and what we can do to really reach out and help them. So Sam went ahead and shared with me some of the letters that were written to the first responders in 9/11, and you can go ahead and find that in the survival guide that displays today's episode. So there's a link in there to that page, and it's just some incredible stuff. So thank you so much for sharing that with me. I want to thank all my Patreon contributors for your continued support. I can't tell you how much it helps keep this show running and help me get the book series into the new avenues that I would like it to travel down. So please take a moment, head on over to www.patreon.com/Changing Earth and become a Changing Earth podcast contributor. That's www.patreon.com/Changing Earth. Thank you guys so much for listening today. I hope you really found the show useful, because like I said, it's just an important topic. We got to make sure we have healthy kids to create a healthy future. So until next time, remember, dream, survive, thrive.
Thank you for joining Sara for this episode of the Changing Earth podcast. Don't forget to pick up your copy of Day After Disaster, Without Land, The Walls of Freedom, Battle for the South, and Dark Days in Denver at www.author.sarafhathaway.com. If you love Sara's books and this podcast, please head over to Amazon or iTunes and let everyone know by leaving a review.